Town Community Development Foundation gatekeepers. I recognize the great sensitivity and the desire for full engagement of every one of the presenters. However, we are going to insist upon the time limit that the committee has observed for all of its proceedings in this final session, and therefore please confine your presentations to 15 minutes each, after which there will be an opportunity for the members to question any points of clarification that are required. There is one other administrative matter. I am obliged to fulfill a professional engagement on or at or around 10 o'clock for about 30 minutes, and subject to the presence of another member to maintain the quorum, I will, with the committee's permission, ask Member Stewart to take the chair for the period that I am away. Is that all right, members? Yes? Thank you. Good. We will dispense with the taking of the minutes because of the lateness of the start and our desire to complete the agenda for this morning. And therefore, I call upon the Women's Empowerment for Change, We Change, to begin their presentation.
Committee Chair, honorable members of this House, fellow Jamaicans, good morning. My name is Shauna Stewart, and this is Nicolette Bryan, and we represent Women's Empowerment for Change, We Change. We Change is in support of the recommendations made by the Abortion Policy Review and Advisory Group in 2007 and have proposed a few recommendations and considerations for this House. According to the APRAG report, since 1995, the issue of unsafe abortion has been debated widely, and calls for amendments to the current legislations and the development of a Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act have been made. The report stated that due to the sensitive political and religious nature of the issue, respective governments have declined to fast-track their policies and the necessary supportive legislations. For this reason, we are here again to discuss Private Members' Motion 61, brought by Member of Parliament, Mrs. Juliet Cuthbert-Flynn. The indecisiveness of successive governments where the decriminalization of abortion is concerned over the past decades is testament to the lack of political will to firmly and fairly address this public health issue. As a result, women, particularly those from poorer circumstances, continue to demonstrate a need for the service. Because abortions are illegal, poor women tend to access abortions on the black market. This leads to an unsafe medical procedure and what we have now come to call botched abortions, which leads to further complications immediately or in the future, such as hemorrhaging, sepsis, and lacerations to the womb and oftentimes death. We have preserved this centuries-old colonial legislation that has very little relevance to the modern conceptions of fulsome reproductive health and rights. Accessing an abortion is a human right, as proclaimed by several international instruments that Jamaica has signed and ratified. We will now draw your attention to a few of these normative framework instruments. The first is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, which was ratified by Jamaica in 1984, particularly General Recommendation number 35, which classifies the criminalization of abortion services as gender-based violence. In its 1999 General Recommendation, the Convention required that states reporting under the Women's Convention address distinctive features of health and life that differ for women in contrast with men. This takes into account biological factors such as differing reproductive functions, socioeconomic factors including unequal power relations, psychosocial factors such as postpartum depression, and health system factors such as the protection of confidentiality especially for the treatment of stigmatizing conditions such as unwanted pregnancies. The second is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which places the individual at the center of international legal concern. The Declaration was proclaimed as a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations and sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected. The individual enjoys rights to protection through his or her nation state, but also to protection against his or her own nation state when that state engages in assaults against the individual's bodily integrity. The third is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which was ratified in 1975. Article 12 protects the human right to the highest attainable standard of health. It requires governments to ensure health services are available, accessible, acceptable, and of adequate quality. Laws and policies that unreasonably restrict safe abortion services would not comply with this performance standard. Fourth, the provision of safe legal abortion is essential to fulfilling the global social commitment to the Sustainable Development Goal of universal access to sexual and reproductive health. Not only is Jamaica in contravention of its international agreements, we are also facilitating the exploitation of a most basic human right, the right to bodily integrity. The World Health Organization since 1967 described unsafe abortion as a serious public health problem. And in 2004, the prevention of unsafe abortion was recognized as a core component of their reproductive health strategy. The ages-old Ireland. It is important to note that this law was replaced by a 1967 Abortion Act, which made abortion legal on a wide number of grounds in all of Great Britain, but not Northern Ireland. Earlier this month, on July 9, 2019, MPs approved an amendment to extend abortion rights to Northern Ireland. We then raised the following questions. Why are we still clinging so tightly to an outdated law given by our former colonizers while they have long progressed? Is religious and political power more important than protecting the lives of our citizens? Why are we allowing the rest of the world to progress and leave us behind? Do we not trust women as moral agents with the capacity to make decisions about their well-being? Who are we holding accountable for ignoring the international conventions we're signatories to? We invite you to consider these questions in your deliberations.
Further research into countries with liberalized abortion laws show no signs of abuse of such laws. Conversely, where abortions are decriminalized, the rates gradually trend downwards. We take a closer look at Switzerland. The Swiss are noted for having some of the most liberal laws relating to abortion, and also some of the lowest abortion rates globally. And as of 2015, stands up at 5 out of every 1,000 women. In Cuba, abortion is available upon request and has been since 1965, where abortions were criminalized as a response to high mortality rates, which were 146 among women due to botched and unsafe abortions. Since then, there has been a downward trend in maternal mortality rates, which as of 2015 stands at 39. This represents a 72% decrease. Requests for late-term abortions are evaluated by a committee comprising doctors and psychologists. This evaluation does not factor religion, but the medical well-being and possible risk factors facing the mother. In the United Kingdom, between 1990 and 2015, the highest maternal mortality rate was 12. And in 2000, this figure began decreasing even more, and after 2005, and as of 2030, stands at 9. After the Abortion Act became effective in 1968, it was noted that up to May 1969, requests for abortions in England and Wales totaled 18,332, or 42.2% for married women, 19,617, or 47.3% for single women, and 3,416, or 8.2% from widowed, divorced, or separated women. These figures reveal that all women are seeking abortions, something which has been associated with promiscuous loose groups of women who engage in risky sex, as anti-choice voices are projecting. A closer look at the United States. According to the Guttmacher Institute, the percentage of women who have abortions were in long-term relationships for a year or more with the person who got them pregnant. Furthermore, the notion that women are careless or would engage in risky sexual practices if there existed free abortion laws is one that is rooted in the belief that a woman's sexual identity is problematic and we need to police their sexual choices, and that the only two identities available is that of a virgin or a whore. The findings from this institute refutes claims put forward by anti-choice voices that access to information about sexual and reproductive health and services lead to risky sexual activities and increase in abortion services. We zone in closer to the Caribbean. Since the passing of the Act in Barbados in 1983, abortion rates have moved from 800 in 1988, gradually decreasing to 645 in 2001 and 500 in 2015. And maternal mortality rates have also drastically fallen by 53%. This is according to the World Bank. These are our proposed amendments, recommendations, and considerations.
Now, recommendation 1, we propose that Section 72 and 73 of the Offences Against the Persons Act be repealed. We change to understand that this law that have been created by white colonialists during a period where British colonialism and patriarchy intersected to deny black women personhood and the legitimacy of their agency. Its relevance and applicability to the current Jamaican context, one that is duty-bound in ensuring that a woman is afforded the means to exercise and enjoy the full extent of her sexual and reproductive health and rights, is unfounded. We must be proactive in shedding the final shackles of our colonial past by doing away with legislation that was not written by us or for us. Jamaican women and girls are dying and being irreparably harmed due to the incomplete abortions, or maintenance of an antiquated legislation that ignores the actual lived realities of thousands of women sends a very clear message of our lack of commitment to their well-being. When we continue to deny women the right to the termination of a pregnancy, we continue to ignore a prevailing and alarming public health crisis. Recommendation 2, we recommend that the Ministry of Health establish and maintain centers with trained personnel to provide surgical and medical termination of pregnancies according to the guidelines provided by the World Health Organization. The ministry should ensure the creation of a national guideline that codifies the standards for which facilities, staff, and treatment should be held. This guideline would distinctly state the kinds of abortion services that are to be provided according to the law, the authorized personnel and facilities by which an abortion may be procured, and most importantly, it should reflect regard for the rights of women to make decisions about their bodies and prioritize preserving their dignity and privacy. Recommendation 3, we recommend appropriate pre, during, and post-abortion care and treatment that should be available and accessible to women and girls. Healthcare providers should be trained in how to provide pre-abortion care, such as ensuring that the woman is in fact pregnant to determine her gestational period so as to infer the method of abortion that is necessary. Healthcare providers should respect the woman's autonomy during pre-abortion counseling. There should be no requirement for the authorization of any third party to access abortion services unless required by law and related regulations. Our fourth recommendation, we propose that women should be able to terminate a pregnancy upon request. We believe that access to abortion is a human right and that denials and restrictions only serve to infringe on a woman's full human rights. Our fifth recommendation, we propose national multi-agency and multi-sectorial public education campaign aimed at destigmatization with special outreach to the faith community. Multiple studies and reports have noted that strong religious belief informs the general consensus on abortion. These beliefs are reinforced through popular music, chastising and shaming women who, quote unquote, dash for belly. This stigmatization has the ability to impact the dignity and the self-worth of young women and girls who have had abortions. Therefore, a critical step in reforming abortion laws is embarking on destigmatization campaigns with the aim of dispelling myths and misinformation and providing factual, evidence-based data in a real and understandable way.
Women's understanding of our bodies, their function in relation to men, and the social spaces we occupy have been determined by and rooted in Christian orthodoxy. These beliefs, given the Church's tremendous power and influence in all spheres of our society, form the basis for Jamaica's sociocultural attitudes towards women, sexuality and health, and encourage the development of shame and fear regarding sexuality and our bodies. This fear of shaming, ostracization, and the social stigma also cripples women's desire to live in dignity and with integrity. The denial of safe, affordable, and legal abortion services to women without restrictive parameters has been detrimental to scores of Jamaican women. We Change is of the opinion that the government of Jamaica needs to demonstrate good faith, respect, and commitment towards protecting the sexual and reproductive health rights of women and girls by implementing the proposed recommendations and considerations of the Abortion Policy Reform Group and those suggestions to remove the barriers to women and girls' ability to access their full human rights. We call on the government of Jamaica to live up to their commitments towards achieving gender equality, eliminating gender-based violence as outlined in the international treaties and conventions that they have signed and ratified. We ask the government of Jamaica to stand between women and girls who are in need of protection from sections of the church who are seeking to spread lies and misinformation in order to vilify the intentions of women. We call on our government to recognize that as citizens of this country, we're also entitled to rights of citizenship and that access to abortion is not a political issue. It is in fact a public health issue. Your recognition will ensure that young women and girls your recognition will reassure young women and girls that their health is of priority and concern. It will ensure that women and girls who are in need of abortions can have one safely and with dignity. Here ends our presentation.
Thank you very much, Women's Empowerment for Change. May I just, as a matter of guidance for the future presenters, where we have your presentation and have studied it and will study it more, it may be more helpful rather than, if you wish not to read it, but rather to highlight certain particular portions for our benefit. Thank you. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Thank you then, Women's Empowerment for Change, for your presentation. And I now call upon Professor McCaw-Binns, Professor Abel, and Dr. Bailey for your presentation.
I'm trying to get this to move, but it's not. While we're waiting, I'd just like to thank the Honorable House for, on this occasion, unlike the 2007 to 8 process, allowing both sides to be able to present their views in a safe way and to be heard. I'm waiting for my slides to be uploaded.
We've heard from Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn. She's mistook the time of our commencement and will be here shortly. And we're still hoping that Dr. Ferguson will make it.
And also I'd like to apologize for Professor Abel, who has a ward round this morning and is unavoidable absent. Dr. Bailey is here with me um, to support this presentation. This is crazy. What is happening?
We just call up your name. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this morning I'm going to start by reviewing some of the social factors associated with women's forming relationships in Jamaica, discuss the inequity, morbidity, and mortality associated with our current abortion law, and like the other speakers, provide a practical way forward. So if we start with some of the social factors associated with pregnancy and childbearing. This is really painful. Not now move. I don't know what's happening here, Mr. Technician. It's just not, it's not responding. All right, so.
We have to hold it up high.
All right, so I have to hold it up high. All right. Jesus, this thing.
Let me try.
As a legacy of slavery, Jamaican women face very complicated realities in trying to form relationships. Well, you have the handout there, so you can follow from the handout.
Am I passing?
Here, Miss. This. No, but here she doesn't have it. Pass that to her for me, please. This is just so disappointing because all right, it's so go back. Oh, good grief!
It's not responding.
This thing not talking down here. This is not responding down here, sir. It says the battery have life in it. This is just.
Well, that's why the slides aren't moving.
All right, so in our current situation, in the Jamaican scenario, as a legacy of slavery, marriage is not a prerequisite for procreation. And so women experience, as the other speaker have said, unequal power realities with men. Some demand that women prove their fecundity early and often. And if, like men, women are interested in non-procreative sex, they have very limited capacity to negotiate safe sex. This is just really not very helpful.
Chairman, could we pause and allow the technicians to fix the problem?
It has been sorted out.
This is just.
It's not?
Seriously?
Okay, so
This is ridiculous.
No, but I mean.
You have to say.
No, she can't stand in the
no,
committee.
she can't.
She can't stand. No, she has to be.
No,
on
you have to be on that side.
She has to be on this side. Sit here.
Well, could you sit here?
Is the thing working? Where's the.
Get over with the technician. Could you just have a seat and
will oblige.
Well, I'm at slide 5. So you are going to do it and I have to keep telling you next. Oh, this is annoying. All right. So 1 in 8 women report being forced to have sex against their will at some time, more so lesser educated and poorer women. Jeez. All right. Okay. Let us. You have the handout. Let us work from the handout. All right. So, children have a right to a legally registered name. I'm at slide 6. To a legally registered name. This one. Right there. And to be cared for by their parents, not just their mother, but their mother and father. Just 13% of our births, however, occur to married couples. To record an unmarried father's name on the birth certificate, he must appear before the registrar and acknowledge paternity. 1 in 4 men do not bother. Next, please. Policy initiatives to reduce maternal death include access to skilled providers, subsidized family planning methods, and since 1998, active identification and review of maternal deaths to improve care. While most of the leading causes of maternal death have declined, no remarkable change in abortion mortality is noted, and that's the purple section there, due to the illegal status of abortion, where health providers are limited to providing just post-abortion care. Hence, we are here to appeal to our legislature to change this situation. Next slide, please. Better contraceptive use has reduced births to young women, the dotted lines on the slide, especially adolescents in red. Among women over 30, the solid lines, among women over 30, births have changed little, as this is when women are ready for a family. Next, when HIV disease entered our community in the late 1990s, health promotion messages targeted youth in visiting relationships to use condoms to prevent transmission, further reducing fertility in this age group. Next. Unintended pregnancies occur from either non-consensual sex, next, or if consenting partners do not use a contraceptive or their method fails. Desire for these children will vary by circumstance, but should women or girls be forced to carry a child conceived by rape? Next. Society is often schizophrenic about unwanted pregnancy. Boys will get congratulated for their emerging sexual prowess, while girls are treated as social pariahs. Those rejected by male partners or ejected from the home often suffer acute mental distress, including suicidal ideation. Angst contributes to poor antenatal attendance. Girls forced out of school without a skill face a life of serial polyandry or partner shifting to survive. Boys raised in fatherless homes often lack positive role models, may be verbally or physically abused, worse if they resemble the absent father. Their emotional pain may find solace in drugs, gangs, or violence. Next. Some children are shifted among caretakers or worse, left unsupervised while mothers eke out a living. Next. Inadequate stimulation impact their education, interrupted often by cash flow constraints. With adoption rare, few of these children have the chance to be raised in a loving home. As adults, many repeat the behavior of parents, present or absent. Next, please. Next. So, what does our 1864 law on abortion mean in Jamaica today? Next. The 1864 abortion statutes, as many have said before, expose women and their doctors to felony charges and possible life imprisonment. Next. 2 doctors were recently charged for terminating pregnancies due to statutory rape of 2 14-year-old girls. While the cases were eventually thrown out, the risk of such charges limit responses where care or advice is sought, as even providing information can yield up to 3 years jail time. Next. In 2007, misoprostol was licensed for obstetric use to induce labor in late pregnancy, but entered the underground marketplace as an abortifacient. Despite fewer unsafe surgical abortions, next, we are hearing of fees of over $20,000 for a treatment that costs under $2,000, and this limits access for the socially vulnerable. Without follow-up care, complications may get missed. Next. Now, not all women die. Survivors of unsafe abortion may forego future childbearing if their uterus or tubes get damaged or need a colostomy bag after bowel repair. Other physical and mental anguish create long-term burden for themselves, their families, and the health services. Next. Unsafe abortion discriminates against rural women. Half of urban women seen at the Victoria Jubilee Hospital presented with complications, next, compared to 80% of women attending rural hospitals. Yes, next. Excess mortality due to abortion that is life-threatening, will require intensive care. Of maternal ICU admissions to the university hospital, 74% of abortion cases died, next, compared to only 21% of mothers with other conditions. Next. More known abortion deaths occur at home, as the stigma, next, deter them from seeking care, timely care when problems arise. With 4 of 7 cases missed by maternal mortality surveillance teams due to abortive outcomes, the data we present going forward will underreport the true gravity of abortion-related death. Next. Next. Jamaica's 3rd leading cause of maternal death are abortive outcomes, which include complications of ectopic or tubal pregnancies and abortion. Considered separately, abortion cycles between 4th and 5th place. Next. Maternal mortality ratios of 84 to 110 per 100,000, next, far exceed the global SDG target of less than 70 per 100,000. One unanticipated benefit of misoprostol access has been a 10-year disappearance of maternal suicide. Next. But suicide reappeared in 2018. Next. A 42-year-old mother of 4 took her life at 7 weeks gestation. Next. While a 20-year-old quit her life 17 weeks after giving birth. The Caribbean drug of choice, gramoxone, is an agricultural weed killer. Next. Unsafe abortion selectively sacrifices the lives of young women, accounting for around 20% of deaths in women under 25. But please, remember the 4 or more children orphaned by older mothers who tried to terminate this pregnancy because they could not afford another child. Now let us look beyond Jamaica. Next. Next. Pro-life advocates may be perplexed that abortion rates are lowest where access is legal. Why? Because illegal providers disinterested in women's welfare do not counsel on reliable contraceptive use. Next. Latin America and the Caribbean, the red and orange countries on the slide, where abortion is mostly legal, next, had the highest global incidence of abortion. So retaining the status quo will yield more, not less abortions. Next. As has been said before, Barbados and Guyana decriminalized abortion. Next. And the Guyanese law recognizes the right of conscientious objectors to not perform the procedure. Next. Legal, safe abortion is less risky than carrying a pregnancy to term. U.S. mortality rates were 8.8 per 100,000 for live births, but 0.6 per 100,000 for pregnancy terminations. UK rates were 11.4 and 0.3 respectively. Next. So where should Jamaica go from here? Next. Laws affecting health care should keep pace with current clinical science and values. Few deny the need to respect patient autonomy in medical practice today. Honest debate on legal reform, however, is needed. Religious values should be weighed as matters of religion. Ethical issues should be debated as matters of ethics. And medical claims should be based on robust scientific evidence. If we fail to keep these distinctions clear in our minds, they confuse our response to social choices. Next. Context matters. When this law was passed go back. No, go forward. You're going wrong. In 1864, when the law was passed, Victoria was queen. Women could not own property or vote, and abortion was a technically demanding surgical procedure to be restricted to the most compelling of cases. With safe abortion now less risky than childbirth, the restrictive criminal prohibition contained in this law cannot be justified out of concern for women's health. Next. Reproductive rights recognize the right of couples to decide freely this number, spacing, and timing of their children, effected through good quality health care, including legal and safe abortion, free from coerced sterilization and contraception. Next. Criminal law evokes the most draconian of state powers and should be restricted for instances where it provides a necessary and proportionate response. To decriminalize abortion, next, clauses 72 and 73 of the Offenses Against the Persons Act should be repealed. It would then be treated like any other area of medical practice, subject to the same criminal, civil, administrative, and disciplinary regulations applicable to all clinical procedures, including allowing families redress in cases of malpractice. Next. Legalizing abortion means that a civil law would now enable access to equitable evidence-based services. Regulations would address training and monitoring to prevent abuse. Next. Next. Services should be publicly available close to where women live, constrained only by maternal risk, and should include counseling, family planning guidance, and post-procedure care. Next. Civil society concur that pregnancy terminations could be acceptable if the process recognizes the sanctity of life, is not termination on demand, and counsels women to enable enforced choice. They agree that services are needed in cases of non-consensual sex, risk to the mother's health, and if the fetus is unlikely to be born alive. Next. 2/3 of Jamaican men and most women view the decision to end a pregnancy as a private civil public health, not criminal matter. Next. So in summary, next. Equity, next. Next. Equity requires that we address obstacles limiting disadvantaged groups from benefiting fully from healthcare options. Next. Equal weight must be given to the rights of conscientious objectors as well as women and their families who decide to terminate a pregnancy. You have moved on too fast. Professionals ethically opposed to abortion have a duty of care to refer onward women requesting abortion without delay. Next. Today, with 9 of 10 births occurring outside of marriage and 1 in 4 fathers not acknowledging their children, women should freely decide if they have the physical, spiritual, or social capital to nurture a new life for decades into a happy, healthy, and productive adult. Next. We envisage a kinder, gentler Jamaica where women and men are trusted to make moral decisions and thoughtfully plan their families. And policymakers will support programs that create a more just and compassionate society, making adequate resources available for life-saving interventions. In this Jamaica, abortion is safe, legal, and accessible, and include affordable contraception and child care. Next. We hope the evidence has convinced you that pro-choice is pro-life, and a good civil law outside the criminal code will reduce, not increase, abortion rates, and importantly, save women's lives, as these lives also matter. Thank you.
We want to thank Professor Binns for her presentation. Committee members, are there any questions? Dr. Ferguson, we welcome you, sir.
Sent an apology. Not just a question. I just want to comment on the quality of the presentations we have been getting. And I think it stands well with the parliamentarians and others in really going through this document. I particularly like that section looking at context at the time 1864 and how we would see it in the context of 2019. I think this kind of research, among other things that I have received and heard, really makes good for informed decision. I think one of the big conflicts many of us have had is the conflict relative to the state and religion, and I see attempts being made in relation to how we look at it relative to religion, how we look at it relative to ethics, and I think those things are coming before us. It's really good information for informed decisions. I want to congratulate you on your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ferguson. Any other questions or concerns?
Not a question. I just actually want to thank and congratulate Mrs. Professor Binns, McGraw-Binns. As I said, we were at a conference, I think 2 years ago, speaking on maternal mortality and morbidity. And so I just have to commend you for such a thorough. I know we touched on it a little bit in Trinidad, speaking about the Caribbean and what's been happening. And here we are today. So I just want to commend you. And this, again, was very thorough. Sorry again for being late. I thought the meeting was at 10. I don't know why I saw on my calendar 10 o'clock, because I'm usually on time. So my apologies again for coming in late. But again, thank you again for your for this presentation.
Member Paulwell.
May I suggest, and I do agree that presentations have been excellent. Last week when I first came in, I got a massive wad of paper that is just so difficult to wade through. And I believe that because these presentations are so well done, our colleagues in both houses should benefit from them as well. So perhaps you might want to, in a digitized format, provide all our colleagues with all the papers so that they too can reflect on the issues.
Thank you, Member Powell, for that great suggestion. The clerk has been so advised, and I think that she's making some arrangements for both houses to have access to the documents. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. We will now hear from Professor Opal Palmer DC.
Good morning, fellow Jamaicans, Honorable House. It is my pleasure to be here and to speak on this issue. I want to say that I'm given a historical context because it's important that we understand the milieu in which we're operating and the legacy that we're bringing forth. In your appendix that I sent, and I want to start there this morning because I think it's important that we understand where we are. So when black women reclaimed their bodies, in a public lecture given in 1833, Miriam W. Stewart, a pioneer black abolitionist and women's rights advocate, invoked black women's demand for sexual justice by asking, "What if I am a woman?" And I dare say many women in Jamaica are still raising that question, particularly poor women. It was a question with profound implications if answered in the affirmative. What would it mean to acknowledge women, especially black women, as full citizens with legal capacity and political consent? If black women were granted not just the rights of life, liberty, and happiness, but also self-sovereignty, then they would also be entitled to legal protections of those rights. And the debate around abortion is really about that. This is working now, thank you. By asking that question, Stewart asserted the essential humanity of black womanhood and called for the inclusion of black women as fully humans and autonomous beings. And I really want to underscore that point. We're talking about black women as fully humans and autonomous beings, the owners of their own bodies with the ability to withhold consent and to also decide on the abortion right. So the debate about abortion is reminiscent about the debate about slavery. And those against abolition quoted the Bible and God in their defense of their right to protect their property. And those for emancipation did the same as evidence of why they were entitled to be free. In retrospect, the majority would agree that emancipation was the moral right stance. I don't know if I'm going to be bothering with this. Could we switch the slide, please? Okay, nevertheless, there are many in the shadows and in the open who still feel African black people still have remained slaves. In fact, the institutional structure of slavery still exists, which is why the majority of poor people in the New World and the people who are at least respected are often people of African descent. So let me just continue with that. Enslaved black people never owned or had the right of their bodies. Black men were forced to breed with women, and black women were raped and impregnated with no control over what happened to their children they bore. Many were sold from slavery. It's sold into slavery. One of the things that oftentimes is overlooked when we look at these historical documents is that enslaved people, enslaved black people, men as well as women, had agency, and they exercised their agencies in a variety of ways. And certainly black women exercised their slavery in many ways. For instance, if we look at the historical document that one of our great historians, Lucille Mathurin-Mayer, produced, that in the Caribbean over a 3-year period there were no live births recorded, which was an impossibility because African women and African people at that time decided, rather than enriching the plantocracy, that they would in fact abort, and they used various methods in order to do that. I'm going to return to my paper. While some might say that this is an unfair parallel, I want to offer another key factor of slavery to illustrate why an acknowledgement and understanding of the strictures of slavery are applicable here. Enslaved African people, both women and men, never owned or had the right to their bodies, nor their reproductive rights. The fact is, black men and black women were forced to be bred. Black women did not own themselves or their body or their children. A racist, patriarchal ideology dictated something as personal and private as their womb and sexuality. I do not think Caribbean people have healed from the scar and trauma, and unfortunately the anti-abortion debate is succumbing to this ideology. In a just society where men and women are treated equally, both have the right to own and determine what happens to their bodies, which includes impregnating, pregnancies, type of health care and surgery they elect for curable or other diseases that they might contract. But historical evidence also indicates that many enslaved women practice abortion, and many refuse to have children whose futures were blighted and who were destined to be enslaved like they were. We have evidence that some enslaved people, when they got the opportunity, men as well as women, jumped into the ocean and were swallowed by the waves rather than travel the journey of enslavement. We have evidence that some women use various herbs and other means to abort their life they were carrying. So even when people were told they had no rights to their bodies and no reproductive rights, they did not relinquish their inalienable agency and took a stand for themselves, facing the perils rather than accepting what the enslaver had determined. Women continue to do so today, still at great risk, sometimes losing their lives. Slavery is officially abolished, but women are still fighting for their freedom, for their full emancipation from the enslaver's rule. The truth is, abortion would be a moot point if the emphasis was shifted and men's bodies and sexual rights were being policed. In fact, my son just turned 30, and we had a conversation. He was here 2 weeks ago celebrating his birthday, and one of the things he said is that, Mommy, if men were taught to police their sperms as you taught me, then abortion would be a moot point. What if the law said that all men had to refrain from unprotected sexual intercourse and had to ask every woman they planned to sleep with if she wanted to have his child, and had to simultaneously pledge in writing to support that child financially, emotionally, including care for the child every other week, or the mother get a break, regardless of what happens to the relationship in the future? Why can't we legislate that all men wear condoms, which would not only eliminate unwanted pregnancy, but also the transmitting of diseases such as AIDS and SDS? Those men who insist on policing women's body need to understand they are encouraging flagrant disrespect for women's autonomy, which is tied to an outdated racist patriarchal ideology. I think more constructive time should be spent examining and looking to see how we can improve the many lives that already exist that need our support. Perhaps all the anti-abortionists should be ordered to adopt or provide for the welfare of the many homeless children living throughout Jamaica, and on the records there are about 10,000, and many suspect that that's an underrepresented number. And for the children that are in government-run homes and foster care, as well as the scores of other children who are dying from poverty and abuse, who have no means to go to school or who daily go hungry, and who have no chance of rising above the poverty, violence, and squalor which is their life. There are far too many people currently living in Jamaica who are hungry, anguished, and are daily being killed by an unjust economic and religious system. There are far too many people barely eking out a living without support from government or those life zealots. There's an abundance of present life that need the anti-abortionist voice and support. I want to advocate that we stay out of women's womb and defend the lives that are already present. I want to also refer to another document in the addendum, which looks at excerpt from Enslaved Women and Slavery Before and After 1807 by Diane Payton. On some estates in Barbados, Jamaica, and the Leeward Islands, and perhaps elsewhere as well, cash payments were made to women after their children survived for 1 month, along with additional bonuses to mothers at Christmas time. It is unlikely, however, that these actually made such difference either to women's motivation to have children or to the likelihood of the survival of those children. Indeed, the very idea that these payments might produce such benefits tells us a lot about a system trying to regulate and continue the suppression of women. And a relative small material payment would be enough to alter women's reason for refusing to have children. I want to then, at this point, just insert my own personal story because I think it's important. I am a mother of 3 very wonderful children, and I believe that I have unleashed 3 incredible human beings onto the world. But at 17, my first year in college, my first sexual experience when I became pregnant, I realized and knew that I was not prepared to be a mother, and so I had an abortion. And it wasn't because I didn't value motherhood, or it wasn't because that I didn't want to be a mother, but because I knew that I was not emotionally ready to be a mother. 12 years later, having achieved 2 degrees, traveled and written, I was ready to mother children. Abortion is an issue that is central and to the core of a person's development. It is a societal issue in that being a parent, being active parent, producing thoughtful, well-educated human beings to the development of the society are important. But ultimately, we're talking about women having rights to their body, which is an issue that we've been facing from the enslavement. And the abortion rule as stand still continues that trend of saying that women have no autonomy and no right. And I therefore ask us to investigate and invite us to look at, are we saying that women are incapable or unable to make informed decisions about their life and the life that they want to produce? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adise. Members, are there any questions, concerns, comments? No? So we move on. Thank you, Professor. Okay, we now have Women and Men for Women's Reproductive Freedom and Autonomy, that group. Dr. Team, thank you.
Good morning. We would firstly like to thank the member Cuthbert Flynn for having the courage to pose the motion to consider reforming the laws on termination of pregnancy in Jamaica and to speak on her own experience. Dr. Shakes and I will speak today on behalf of the Women and Men for Reproductive Freedom and Autonomy, which includes Shauna K. Burns, Omar Francis, Javion Nelson, Shani Roper, Nicosia Shakes, Edward Shakes, Camila Thame, and I. My name is Maziki Thame. I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans. I'm a middle-class Jamaican with a high level of education and a single mother who has been the primary caregiver of my daughter for all of her life. In the Jamaica I am from, men too often get to walk away from familial responsibility while women face disgrace for failing to be good mothers. Being middle class is no guarantee of easy mothering. It is not easy mothering without support, financial, familial, and communal. Women need hands to hold babies, pick children up from school, prepare their meals, wash their clothes, care them while we are at work, make decisions on their futures, and give ourselves a break. How and when to choose motherhood is a matter for all women. And women need real support to have a good quality life, whether they choose motherhood or wish to say no to it. We, the descendants of people whose bodies were owned, controlled, and violated by others, should know better than others the value of freedom and the freedom to choose. The Offences Against the Persons Act was created by the British Parliament and introduced into Jamaica in 1864, 26 years after the end of plantation slavery and a year before the Morant Bay Rebellion, by a legislature controlled by the plantocracy, the same people who benefited extraordinarily from controlling the bodies of people of African descent. The Parliament was concerned to guarantee a cheap labor force after the end of slavery, and reproduction by the poor was important to their goal. Criminalizing women's practice of terminating pregnancy aided them in their efforts. By 1865, Paul Bogle and others would try and fail to change the makeup of the legislature to act in defense of the descendants of enslaved Africans. The slave plantation was brutal in its bid to control the bodies of women of African descent, forcing them to labor, reproduce, and bear children that they could not keep while acting as wet nurses for white babies. African women in the Caribbean suffered low fertility given the harsh conditions and violence they suffered under slavery, and they resisted reproduction given those conditions and their desire to control their bodies. Everywhere in the Americas, Black women's bodies, more so than other women, have been and continue to be regulated and experience high violence, including through the Offences Against the Persons Act anti-choice provisions in Jamaica. Those provisions are disempowering to women and make them vulnerable in the clandestine and unregulated sector for abortions. Why would the Parliament of 2019 want to align itself with such painful colonial and racist tendencies? Is our Parliament and society more supportive of Jamaican women than it was in 1864? Barbara Bush's work on African Caribbean slave mothers and children tells us that enslaved women were depicted as poor, negligent mothers who shirked their maternal responsibilities for trivial pleasures such as dancing and gossiping. She points out that, quote, in addition to accusations of negligent parenting, Africans, women in particular, were accused of lax sexuality, an enduring myth perpetuated by Europeans, end quote, and now we, the descendants of those Africans. Today, Black working class women especially have been stereotyped as women who procreate with abandon, without any futuristic assessments, and they are presumed to carry their carelessness into their mothering. These kinds of arguments are used to justify the state's regulation of women's bodies, its failure to protect women, and its failure to grant them reproductive freedom and autonomy. The presumption that girls and women become pregnant through their own carelessness is used to deny them rights to terminate pregnancy on the grounds that it will then be used as contraception. Motherhood thus becomes their punishment for their presumed carelessness. Jamaican women take their reproductive roles seriously, often mothering not just their own children, but others, and taking on most of the caregiving roles in our society. They face complicated realities, and their management of those realities depends on their power to effect real control over their lives and bodies. We purport that the state should seek to align itself with the struggles of the Jamaican women who fought to own their bodies and control their reproductive lives, both under slavery and in the difficult circumstances of their lives since then. Jamaican women have struggled against domination by any authority over their bodies, and their reproductive freedoms ought to be recognized. It should be left to women, not the state, to decide that their particular context is suitable for reproduction. The state should be guided first and foremost by the principle that women can be trusted to make the best decisions for themselves and their reproduction.
Good morning. My name is Nicosia Shakes, descendant of enslaved Africans, scholar, artist, and teacher. And I have chosen to delay motherhood. This decision has led to a lot of questioning from people who see childbearing as a rite of passage that a woman must follow regardless of how she feels about it. Such attitudes disregard the fact that our reproductive choices are never easy. We have to consider whether we have strong emotional and economic support systems, if the pregnancy will be healthy, if maternity leave is possible or sufficient, and if we are in school, the effect on our education, particularly if you're in high school and are forced to leave. Fortunately, I've never had to have an abortion, but many Jamaican women have. A friend recently told me that she got pregnant in college after the contraceptives failed. Luckily, she found out she was pregnant right before she went on a study abroad program to a country that has legalized abortion. There she had one done by a trained medical practitioner at a well-equipped facility. 2 other women I know with whom I attended university had abortions when they were 19 years old in Jamaica, taking huge legal and medical risks. None of these 3 women regrets their abortion. And like me, they made decisions about their reproductive lives and the kind of futures they wanted. If we uphold current restrictions on abortion, future generations will wonder why the democratic government of Jamaica in 2019 thought it was good policy to ignore the thousands of women who risk their lives every year in unsafe, unregulated abortions, many dying. We have maintained an old British law, while other countries also colonized by Britain and Britain itself have moved on. Others have given examples of English-speaking Caribbean countries that have liberalized their laws on abortion, and in particular, the cases of Barbados and Guyana, which have gone ahead and repealed the outdated laws. Guyana has one of the most progressive termination of pregnancy laws in the world, allowing it on the woman's request up to the 2nd trimester and for health preservation afterwards. With information from the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and World Population Review, we surveyed 200 countries, sovereign and non-sovereign. As of 2018, 47.5% have very progressive termination of pregnancy laws. They permit abortion either on request or to preserve the mother's life and health, socioeconomic reasons, and in cases of incest, rape, or fetal impairment. Approximately 1/3 of these progressive countries are in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, most of which, like Jamaica, had European colonial laws criminalizing abortion, and most of which have large religious populations, in particular Christian and Muslim. We recommend that Jamaica join this category of countries. Overall, 54% of the countries in the world as of 2018 have very progressive laws or do not prohibit abortion in most extenuating circumstances, whether in cases of rape, incest, socioeconomic reasons, health reasons, in addition to preserving the mother's life. So Jamaica is actually in the minority of countries that only allow it in 3 or less circumstances, that is, to preserve the woman's life and health or prohibit it altogether. It is not enough that one might justify an abortion by common law if a doctor can prove that the woman's life is at risk. a threat to one's life goes beyond physical or mental health. Quality of life is also crucial and tied to one's daily realities. So we urge the Jamaican Parliament to consider these three major realities of Jamaican women. First, the poorest Jamaicans are mostly female. According to the 2018 Economic and Social Survey, unemployment is higher among women than men, and surveys by the PIOJ and Statin over the years consistently show that sole parent households headed by women are the poorest in the country. Second, the numerous incidences of sexual abuse in which most victims are women and girls, victims and survivors are women and girls. From the 2016 survey of women's health, we learned that 1 in 10 Jamaican women have been raped at some point in their lives. And about 1 in 3 of the women surveyed did not want to have sex or did not consent on their first experience of intercourse. This makes them especially vulnerable to pregnancy as a result of rape, including statutory rape, in a society where it is still the norm to pair older men with young girls. And it's worthy of note as well that 2/3 of the women in this study who had gotten pregnant said they did not want to get pregnant in their last pregnancy. Third, we ask you to consider the racial and class implications of our anti-abortion laws in a country where the majority of the women are 6 generations out of slavery, a system that treated them as disposable, or indentureship which exploited their labor. Poor women are particularly prone to health complications and death as a result of unsafe abortions. But even middle class and rich women are risking their health having abortions at unregulated private doctors. Jamaican governments often boast about the mechanisms they are putting in place to deal with issues of gender, like the National Policy for Gender Equality and National Strategic Plan to Eliminate Gender-Based Violence. Some of my pro-choice colleagues have mentioned international conventions and agreements as well. At the most abstract level, we have the Jamaican Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms that prohibits, quote, discrimination on the basis of being male or female, end quote. That's Chapter 3, Section 3I, page 4. Discrimination is not always manifested in obvious inequalities that can be defined through quantitative measures like gender mainstreaming. Often, discrimination is implicit in the constitutions of countries, even while the governments of these same countries draft charters and governmental declarations that make bold promises about freedom. In a 2003 essay titled Beyond the Bill of Rights, Sexing the Citizen, Jamaican legal scholar and attorney Tracy Robinson analyzes how Anglophone Caribbean constitutions implicitly endorse inequalities on the basis of sex and gender, even while making general declarations about equality. Sections 72 to 73 of the Offenses Against the Person Act is a perfect example of this sexist constitutional tendency. It implicitly punishes girls and women in this country because they are female and able to get pregnant. We urge the Jamaican government to repeal current laws against abortion and support the call of the Abortion Policy Review Group to introduce a Termination of Pregnancy Act. We also want to single out their recommendation to ensure the provision of these services in every health region, as inadequate access can be a problem even in countries with legal abortion on request. We, women and men, descendants of people whose bodies were owned, controlled, and violated by others, assert that women can act as responsible moral agents and as such should have reproductive autonomy, including the freedom to decide whether to terminate a pregnancy. We oppose punitive laws against women and support efforts towards their reproductive freedom as a matter of social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shakes and Dr. Thiem. Yes, members, are there any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Dr. Ferguson.
I was just looking through my document, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the presenters, but I am not seeing that, because one of the things I want the committee members to have is that the presentations that are being made is in, while we can get it from Ansard, is in keeping also with what they send to us, because in some instance they have updated the presentations with significant new information, and I believe we really would want to get that information, what is being presented to us, because again, if we are going to pass it on to other members of parliamentarians, you really would want to represent the best of what they would have presented.
Yes, Dr. Ferguson, I think you're absolutely correct. The document that was presented to us is a one-page document. I don't know if it will be made available to the clerk, so we
It will be available.
Thank you.
It was updated because we had 15 minutes and we learned of new information, so it will be provided.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely.
Professor?
Yes, I'm asking for the opportunity also to update our presentation, because I'm going to be very honest. I was part of the group from the 2008, and I mean, I've been doing this thing for 30 years and begging and not getting anywhere. I benefited from the multidisciplinary submissions and sitting in the galley last week and hearing what were some of the questions and gaps in information that the parliament, from the questions that the parliamentarians were asking, and therefore revised what I presented this morning. And I want the House to make a very informed decision when they come to some consensus on this matter. So I'm asking whether or not our group can also
yes, certainly, we will
update
accommodate
our
it.
presentation and resubmit it.
Yes, Professor Benz, we will certainly accommodate it, and the clerk is taking note of your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will now have the Joytown Community Development Foundation gatekeepers. I don't know who will be the first presenter. Major.
Good morning, Chairman. I just would like to be able to stand up, take a deep breath, and refresh. Now, thank you very much for having us this morning, Chairman and the committee. It is our prayer that the information we present will assist this committee and Parliament in arriving at a decision which is both righteous and a blessing to Jamaica, land we love. Today, from the gatekeepers, we have a number of persons. I want to quickly introduce them, but I just want to make sure that there are two videos to be shown, whether they're lined up and ready. Sorry? Beg your pardon? So whilst...
Just a moment, the clerk is...
All right, we're ready. So if I may just proceed with... introducing quickly, we have with us today the Roman Catholic Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Kingston, the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards. We've got the Reverend Dr. Peter Garth of the Gospel Assemblies of Jamaica and the President of the Jamaica Evangelical Alliance. We should have had Bishop Everton Thomas, but unfortunately fell ill, so he's not with us today. Bishop Alvin Bailey, his wife has cancer, so he also had to be absent, stay home to look after her. She's a serious condition. We have Miss Christina Milford, the Executive Director of Pregnancy Resource Center of Jamaica. We have the Very Reverend Richard Holong, Father Holong, of Missionaries of the Poor. We also have Reverend Garfield Blair of the New Testament Church of God, and his wife, Mrs. Marcia Blair, who is a registered nurse and midwife. And then there is myself, Major Richard Cook. I am an elder in the Covenant City Church and convener of the Gatekeepers. So, this morning, we also want to see a short video from a Dr. Maureen Condick. We had actually invited her to come here, but she was not able to do so, and we asked if we could...
There's a concern, Major, that we are hoping that the video is not too graphic, especially we have students, some young persons in the
No,
gallery.
there's no graphic video.
Okay.
Yep.
And we were not circulated with the video. The clerk is saying that she did not get the video.
Well, I don't know why she didn't get the video, because we agreed from the 3rd of July that I could bring the video to Mr. Merrick Brown, which I have so done. And it's there and ready to be played.
Just one moment there, Major.
It's two. Yes. So actually, Mr. Chairman, we'd hoped that Dr. Condick could have actually joined us by video conference. The committee, I think, turned that down, what the clerk tells me. Because we would have had her give testimony. She's an expert in the area we're dealing with. Because it's very important to us to make the point that we're not dealing with a mass of cells, but we're actually dealing with a life, a human being, at every stage of development.
Yes, your point
So I
is
think it's
taken.
important that we see it. So if we can just roll it and not all of the
We're
whole
just
committee.
making some checks with the technical persons there.
Yeah, I have one in my pocket too. Yeah, at the appropriate time. So whilst you're working that out, Mr. Chairman, if I can just give you some rubberized babies.
Could you turn off the mic? Father. Okay, Major, you may go ahead, please. Yes, please.
So would they just pause that? Thank you. Right. So we want to see this video by Dr. Kondik, who is an associate professor of neurobiology and anatomy at the University of Utah School of Medicine, with an adjunct appointment in the Department of Pediatrics. She is an expert in human embryology and has testified before Congress that babes in the womb experience pain from as early as 8 weeks, if not before. Now, the pro-life groups have already presented a great deal of very compelling evidence before the committee for the consideration of Parliament, so that today we will refer to some of it, but not go back into the details except where members may seek further clarity in Q&A. We will show or simply restate that 1, induced or elected abortions take a human life. 2, that there is never a need for the deliberate killing of a baby in the womb at whatever stage of development it may be. 3, that pregnant women, like many of us in crisis, can be helped through any crisis they face with the help of people with a caring attitude and the right training. That women are hurt by abortions psychologically, psycho-emotionally, physiologically, and morally. 5, that legislation leads to an increase in abortions and to eugenics, which I've even heard being advocated in here since morning. 6, that trying to legalize abortion is philosophically, morally, and ethically wrong. A woman's hurt, or even worse, convenience cannot take precedence over a child's life. And 7, that governments and this Parliament are set up by and answerable to God. So, Chairman, we're asking that the members allow us to just complete the presentation as a whole, and then we will take the questions. So the first matter to be addressed is that of determining what or who is scraped or sucked out of a woman's uterus in an abortion performed from the time of conception up to the first 12 weeks. As some have said that it is only a baby after 12 weeks. Most women do not know that they're pregnant till week 6. But the euphemism, the product of conception, is in fact a baby. In their article, The First 14 Days of Human Life, Professors Patrick Lee, Professor of Bioethics, Franciscan University of Steubenville, and Robert George, McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence at Princeton University, indicate that the 3 standard embryology texts locate the beginning of the human individual at fertilization, not implantation. They make the point that the human person, even as a single cell, pursues self-directed development without external input. Therefore, whether the baby is a single-cell zygote, an embryo, or a fetus, the baby is a self-directed person and not just some arbitrary mass of cells. This article is attached to provide you with detailed information and a reference to the 3 texts. So now, if we can play Dr. Kondik's testimony, thank you. So, members, we particularly would want you to firstly note that the brain begins to develop by week 4, with pain by week 8. Secondly, children with little to no thinking capacity still exhibit personality. Now, I also want to take a moment for us to see what an abortion is. It is not one of an actual abortion. So if we just take a moment to look at that, please, and hear the abortionist comments. So if you just run that for me now, please. Thank you. Chairman, could I ask that this be stopped, please?
Yeah. I ask that we discontinue.
Yes.
I did make the point early on that we have children in the gallery, and it is too graphic.
All right, Chairman, can we move to the end? Can I just ask him to move it to the end where the doctor speaks? So if we take away sucking out the baby out of the uterus, bit by bit, and just
Chairman,
move it.
Chairman, please, can I make a statement? I have been to the doctor to do a blood test, and I faint. Not because, well, I can't manage. Me, at my age, I am seeing some children in this parliament. It is totally unacceptable for this to be shown to children. I can't manage it, so I can imagine them.
Your point is well made, Member Paul. And I did make the point that if we're going to be having any graphic, too much presentation, that we're going to have to abort that section of the presentation.
Chairman,
I ask that be done.
I understand that, and I was actually, because it's not the actual abortion, I didn't think it was a problem, but since the members think it's a problem, what I would like to ask for is for the technician to just move the thing past the graphics to where the doctor speaks, to just close it out, okay? We could also ask the children to turn their backs, but we won't do that because it's important. It's important for the committee.
Did he say that?
It's important for the committee to actually see and hear. But can I just move it to the point?
No,
Chairman, sorry for saying that. Can we just move it to the point where they see?
No, we're going to ask Major that the presentation, that section be aborted.
Yes, I agree, sir.
And we continue with your oral presentation.
No, but I was asking, can we just hear the doctor?
I am making a ruling, sir, that we discontinue with that section of the presentation. Thank you.
I accept your ruling, Chairman. So the truth is, Chairman, that we see that it is a human life, whatever the circumstances, and as devastating or unfortunate as they may be, taking the life of the unborn child living within her is not a moral or a helpful solution for a woman, but is rather a danger to her health. Every abortion is dangerous. There are no safe abortions in any abortion clinics, whether legally or illegally set up. Father. So, Father, how long will continue? Absolutely, it's true.
Father, how long?
The church is prepared to partner with the government of Jamaica and overseas organizations to expand the church's present number of homes catering to pregnant women and those catering to unplanned and unwanted children, to ensure that women in crisis have access to the necessary counseling support and the required resource facilities. We are prepared to assist young women who see their future threatened by the unexpected interruption and ongoing responsibility of an unplanned pregnancy. We will advocate for an improved adoption system. we're reminded of Dr. Charles Roy's presentation, in which he made the point that approximately 95% of abortions are for convenience, and of what Scripture says, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Before God, we cannot agree or advise this Parliament to rescind sections 72 and 73 of the Offences Against the Person Act, signaling to women that they have any sort of a right to terminate the life of a child in the womb. Women with serious medical threats to their lives usually do all they can to preserve the life of the unborn child. Such women are at liberty under the present law to work with a team of medical professionals who are under oath to preserve life, to seek to save both lives by bringing the baby as close to term as the health threat will allow, giving the child the best possible chance of survival instead of being purposely destroyed as in an elected abortion.
There. Good day.
Yes, Mrs. Milford, yes? Are you here? No, your mic is not coming on. Could you maybe switch to another one?
Hello, good. Yes.
Yes.
It's clear. Thank you for your patience and for this opportunity to share in your house. Indeed, I've listened to the presentations, and I can say I know for sure there are no truly safe abortions. And abortions, if not physically damaging, have negative consequences to the abortive mother. This includes rape victims. The statistics have shown that women who have been raped and who deliver the resulting baby generally do better than women who choose to terminate the pregnancy as a way of seeking relief from the trauma. At this point, if you'll allow me, I'll take a note from what my sisters have shared. As a woman who I was not owned, but controlled and violated by a man, I had a plan for my future as a nurse in England. I would be trained in England in 1973. I put my applications in, having researched it for 10 years, how to get trained, to meet my parents in England and my siblings. On the night after my interviews with the Nurses Council of Jamaica, I was raped by a young man who had his own decisions. Several weeks later, to find out what was wrong with me, I went to the doctor, and the same day that the doctor confirmed that I was pregnant, I got the results from the Nurses Council that I was accepted. I should bring $500, $800, and my passport. I'd be on my way to my dreams. They crumbled, they crashed around me. I was a depressed girl. I had consequences. I sought an abortion because friends pressured me into it. However, when I went to the doctor and explained my case, he was saying, "Did you report this to the police?" No, I didn't. No girl who is raped wants to report anything to the police or to let anybody even know about it. The doctor checked me and he said, "Don't do it. If you go to any backstreet person, do it, you'll either end up losing your life or never being able to have another child." I was already depressed, so it didn't matter. I just went ahead and went home. Years later, I have my son, who's an excellent human being. I've never looked at him in any way, in any regard, negatively. As a matter of fact, he seemed to be a trophy from this devastating event. I did not do nursing in England, but today I support girls and young women who are in trauma from a pregnancy they did not plan for nor want. Their unwanted pregnancy did not produce unwanted babies. Every one of them have wanted their babies, even the ones who have released them for adoption, which is a very good option. They didn't want their babies dead. They wanted them alive, and they wanted them nurtured. When they couldn't do it themselves, they were ready to release it to others. I can tell you that the unborn baby is a person. My son is a person. He lives, and when I held his first child, my first thought was, my God, if I killed him, this one couldn't be here. So in the killing of one child, it's a whole generation that goes. May I just insert this bit that the council can have? The research concerning the legalization of abortion, we need to understand the foundations of this came from Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger regarded us as human weeds. She was a eugenist. She said black people were human weeds, reckless breeders, spawning human beings who should never have been born. She said on the purpose of birth control, just so you know, the purpose is promoting birth control was to create a race of thoroughbreds. Get rid of these indigents so that the thoroughbreds could go on. She said we do not want, when they had a plan for a black doctor and a black nurse to get to a black congregation, to influence black people to receive family planning. They had a plan between Dr. Gamble and herself that said, we do not want, they would convince them to have abortions, to cut down. They don't want so many children, they'll make you poor. We do not want word to go out that what we want to do is to exterminate the Negro population, she said, if ever it occurs to any of their more rebellious members. The reference to that is Woman's Body, Woman's Right, a Social History of Birth Control in America. On mandatory sterilization of the poor. Mandatory sterilization of the poor should be a prerequisite to receiving any public aid. Margaret Sanger is a foundation of Planned Parenthood. And this woman has, another woman continues to say, listen, we had a plan to sell abortions. It was called sex education. We get the little girls past their natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values. Then we'd introduce them to low-dose contraceptives and defective condoms that would not prevent pregnancy. When they became pregnant, they'd come to us for abortions. We don't take checks, we only take cash because you can trace checks, you cannot trace cash. It was about money. Abortion, the abortion industry, abortion business is about money. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Melford. Do we have other presenters? Because they've... Could you turn off the mic? Because your time would have been expired as it relates to
Dr. Aaron Kiriati provided us with a clear indication that women who have abortion suffer psychologically and emotionally, and many tend to get into a cycle of repeat abortions or pushing other women towards having abortions. Dr. Kiriati referred to conclusions which were the results of pooling 22 published studies with over 800,000 participants and more than 161,000 women who had undergone abortions. These studies included, the studies included were selected according to stringent criteria to ensure sound methods, an adequate sample size, and appropriate control groups. This represented by far the largest study done yet on the question of abortion and mental health. Other presenter, number 4.
Major, you're trespassing on time now. Could you wind up in a minute or two, please?
Everybody got a little extra time, sir. If you can give us a little to just wrap up.
We're going to be as following the rules as best we can, so just a minute or two more, please. Remember, we have everybody's presentations, and therefore, while we value your verbal input, we are going to be fair in that regard. Go ahead, please.
Pleasant morning, everyone. No child should be killed because there is a suspicion by virtue of often inconclusive tests that it will be handicapped, have Down syndrome, sickle cell, or any other trait. A clear example is that of Denmark. The Danes instituted eugenics through prenatal screening, particularly seeking to abort unborn babies who showed any signs of undesirable traits, and in particular, Down syndrome. Women who resisted the pressure of seeming to be socially irresponsible and kept their babies have shown that the tests, although being indicative, are frequently not accurate. Elimination of children with Down syndrome supported the Danes' goals of being among countries with the cleverest school children in the world and being among the world's wealthiest countries with the longest livers. The recent statistics, as reported in the Irish Times, are not good, as these unborn persons who were determined by the new order to be less than persons were slaughtered in utero as follows. 2016, 133 of 137 diagnosed inaccurately. These were aborted in 2010. All 156 were aborted. Our rejection of the knowledge of God in Romans 1, verse 21 to 22, and the Bible-based morality has opened the door to an ever-advancing depravity in what we consider acceptable and even right. Humans now were chattel, and we can, without conscience, cull the herd like just so much cattle. Both Britain and the USA are also guilty of practicing eugenics through prenatal screening and elective abortions. The laws in these countries are often ignored to facilitate personal agenda. In USA, 80 to 90% of Down syndrome fetuses are aborted, indicating it is a common practice among women who have learned that the fetus they are carrying have Down syndrome. In the West, who vilified Hitler for practicing eugenics, has now embraced it. The West, which once was horrified by rejecting the pagan practice of child sacrifice, now seems not to be disturbed by it at all.
Mr. Bryan, thank you very much for that. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Archbishop? Or? We are well aware that we are exceeding our time. We have been in this committee very accommodating of everyone's views and expect them to exercise a commensurate discipline. I'm anxious for very brief conclusions to follow, please.
Chairman and members, no one denies the struggle it is for a woman to bring to term even the most wanted of babies, much less the mental and physical anguish that she must undergo to carry and deliver a child who has been thrust upon her through rape or incestuous abuse. But we have clearly established that killing the innocent child is not the answer to her problems. Rather, given support and counseling, she comes to recognize that the new and innocent life within her is not guilty of the crime. And somehow, miraculously, God uses the delivery of the child as a part of our healing process. As Christian leaders, we are unequivocal in our understanding from Scripture that a child in the womb is a human being for whom God has a plan. Jeremiah 1 verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Please read carefully our a full submission which is 9 pages long, with supporting documentation which takes up to 43 pages. You will arrive at the same conclusion we have, that you must preserve the life of the child in the womb at all stages of its development. I would like to say that a lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by mere mortals, members of parliament, ministers of religion, or the majority.
Thank you very much. And I've spoken with Major Cook, and the final presentation will be by Archbishop Richards.
The parliament will have to choose whether it is a parliament for the majority of the people or for a minority. A parliament of righteousness or one which brings additional curses upon the nation. What is this curse? We fail to link the high murder rate with a disaffection that exists in human social engagement. Abortion is a contribution to this break in the seamless regard that must be had for the dignity of human life that begins in the womb and after birth. Will we blindly follow the West into its great apostasy, which is an abandonment of Christian values that underpin human value and and therefore yield to a loss of a moral compass? Let us rather work assiduously to reduce the incidence of incest and rape. Let us use our resources to provide the best possible support and care for any of our women who have suffered rape, incest, or any form of unwanted or unexpected pregnancy. Let us respect the dignity and humanity of the conceived child who is absolutely innocent, having done nothing to create the painful situation. To do otherwise is to participate in the culture of death, as noted by Pope John Paul II, who said, "We are facing an enormous and dramatic clash between good and evil, death and life, the culture of death and the culture of life. Let us do the right thing, choosing the culture of life, and make the right decision to keep abortion illegal, as set out in Section 72 and 73 of the Offenses Against the Person Act. We speak of the rights of the women to determination over our body. What about the right of the innocent child, the innocent voice? The atrocities of slavery were administered against a silent, innocent people. We speak today for a silent, innocent life. The fact is, not many of us may have been born from the ideal scenarios we present, but we are grateful for our existence. Can we accord the privilege we enjoy to the silent, innocent lives that we are seeking to deny the right to life?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the members? Dr. Ferguson.
I know that persons representing pro-life, pro-choice have made presentations before this committee, Chairman. And this morning we would have had, in this last presentation, 7 members of the one side making presentations. What I wanted to hear from this group, based on the presentations that have been made, the question of making some kind of differentiation relative to the pro-choice persons who have spoken to making a distinction between the decision for an abortion and religion, the distinction in terms of ethics and morality. but have presented strong arguments. I would love to hear some kind of reaction coming from this group of presenters, because in my mind, we know, and I was a part of as opposition spokesman on health between the period of Rudyard Spencer was minister at the time, and we had extensive consultation across the island on this abortion issue. And the arguments that kept coming in this regards and remain today, question of religion, ethics, morality, and the fact that the time that life began and all that. I would just love to hear from this group in relation to those issues. What is it that they are saying? You know, because we have had, as I said, strong arguments that have come in this house. I'd love to hear.
Ferguson's question, I'm not sure I fully understand it, but maybe you do.
Yes. It's amazing that as a Christian people, because Christianity underpins who we are as a people, and often when we run into trouble as a nation socially, we are always asking, what is the church saying? What are the values that the church is advancing to bring about the social transformation that we need to live civilly with each other? And so we cannot deny the influence of Christian religious values with respect to the understanding of who we are as persons, but also how we should interact with each other on a social level. With respect to ethically, you know, ethics is about what is right and what is wrong. And the primary principle that we need to bring to the fore is that we're talking about being human and having regard for human life. And whether that human life is in the womb or is outside the womb, we acknowledge that there is need to respect and have due regard for the human person. And we cannot make a distinction with respect to the fact that when a person is born, that we should have laws against murder or destruction or harming of that person when we are doing the same thing when that person exists in the womb. Because when the abortion process is being done, advanced, and completed, the abortionist has to put together every limb that is mutilated within the womb to ensure that every aspect of a human person is outside the womb and does not remain in the womb. And so that is an ethical issue with respect to what is right and wrong. We're talking about a human life. Recently, a young lady that we have in our care of suffering abuse, she gave birth to a child, and within a couple of days later, the child died. And even though she was a victim of abuse, she's in distress. I saw her up to Sunday, and she's devastated that she lost the child. And so we need not only to speak conceptually or only on one side of the issue, but we need to consider the solutions that we bring to the table with respect to the fact that accompaniment of persons suffering abuse, that they can manage their situations. And I think this we need to advance as an approach with respect to dealing with this issue. I hope that contributes to the understanding that you seek, Minister. Member.
Thank you very much, Archbishop. Are there any other questions?
Sir, if I may say something.
Yes,
one of the disappointments that I have is that when it comes to church, people believe that it is faith and feelings. But as Dr. Francis Schaeffer, can't doubt his intellectual capacity. Francis Schaeffer says that faith is informed by facts. So the coach has to be facts, faith, and then feelings are involved. And I say that as I go back to ethics. The situation is that some persons we know do not accept the Bible. Well, I'm saying that my faith in God is based and built upon facts. And I believe that we have credible evidence for the authenticity of the Bible. One of the world's renowned ethicists, Dr. Norman Geisler, respected across the world, and although he's a man of faith, he has a book, Ethics, Alternatives, and Issues. And in that book, he looks at the matter of abortion. And what he says is that we are contending, because there are some doctors who are saying, especially years ago, that it doesn't take place at conception. In recent times, based on technology, serious research doctors, as we know, and the presentations have been given, serious research doctors are saying, no, it is not so. And some of them, they have nothing to do with Christianity. Geisler says, listen, if you accept, and we are people of faith and we believe the Bible, if you believe the Bible and you take it at face value, then would you be prepared to run the risk, if you are in a forest, the illustration that he uses, and there is some movement out there and you are not certain that it is a human being or a wild animal, would you be prepared to pull the trigger? He brings it into morality and ethics, and he says that the church ought to take the higher ground.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ferguson,
May I say a word, sir?
You know,
yes.
I'm anxious that everyone has a chance, but I'm anxious also that we don't repeat and prolong an argument, which I think has been, or points that have been well established. Father Holong wishes to say, Professor Palmer Adisa wishes to say also, and then we will cut it there, eh? Yes. Father Holong, please.
I can tell you this, brothers and sisters, that as a man totally dedicated to Jamaica and to life at all the stages, I honestly fear from the depths of myself that we will offend God by adopting a policy of pro-choice. Women, I think, who pay to have their babies murdered in the womb will bring the wrath of God upon us, not only upon women, upon this nation. Because I do believe that abortion has changed the matter in a subtle way, from thou shalt not kill to thou you should kill. I think it's a human matter. The women are very deeply involved. The men are also very deeply involved. We have overall about 2,000 homeless people that we take care of. In addition to that, maybe another 5,000 who come for partial care, but 2,000 that live with us and so forth. And every single one of them, brothers and sisters, are happy to be alive. Nobody is unhappy to be alive. And the many Down syndrome that we have, they cook, they clean, they laugh, they dance. Everybody has a right to life. Everybody has a right to right. Why we powerful people who have the knowledge, if you want to call it that, and ability to kill, be allowed to make a decision over the life of another? I think you can see, and I've watched so many videos, that that child in the womb wants to live. And I say, please, brothers and sisters, watch out. We do not want to bring the displeasure of God upon our nation, and especially our beautiful women. I was brought up by a woman who was so wonderful. a Jamaican woman as well as my own mother. So I pray to God, brothers and sisters, do not go the way of allowing for abortion. We'll take care of them somehow. I think everybody here is concerned, and I pray that we understand each other. We all are concerned, you know. I don't think you want to throw around words like outdated. So what? Truth is not outdated. God is not outdated. But let us go for truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Palmer will be the final brief presenter or responder.
Thank you. I think it's important that we understand whatever side one believes, that no one, first of all, those of us who are pro-choice, we are very morally committed to life. And I think that needs to be understood. What we're saying is that women have the right to choose the kind of life they desire for themselves when certain circumstances happen. We are very moral, ethical people who believe in the right to life. I believe in the right to life, but I also believe the right for women to own their own bodies and to make decisions. And it's not a dichotomy. So that needs to be clearly understood. And if we're talking about freedom and we're talking about God and we're talking about not pointing fingers, then we need to understand that each of us here as individual has been given that individual choice and potential by God to make decisions for ourselves. And we should allow us to make those decisions, and then we can have our judgment with our own God, whomever she or he may be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since this is the last session, I will not chasten the gallery. But the gallery needs to observe the rules of this parliament. Thank you very much, presenters. And I'm happy to, I made a clear ruling. We cannot have these responders go on and on. Yes, I made it clear. Yes? If we continue like this, everyone will have a second issue. We can hear you, Dr. Person.
No, I'm just saying, Chairman, this is the last. I deliberately raised that question in the context that I prefer that he's from
Mike, turn off your mic. Turn off your mic. Yes.
Thank you. This is our last meeting. I think we made the sacrifice to come here. Today is my constituency day, and I was very willing to come to this meeting. And I leave here to go there, but I really wanted to hear. I deliberately raised that issue earlier, which you said, Chairman, you might not have understood. But I raised it in the context that this is the first time we have had both pro-life and pro-choice sitting in this chamber. Having raised it, or it might have had before, I'm just saying the sittings have been. I am proposing that we should, I'm not saying all should have.
So should we have a debate now on these between these two?
Professor Binns wanted to say something,
and should we entertain that from everyone who wishes?
No.
Please tell me your pleasure.
I believe there are about 3 persons that.
Are there other hands are being raised? This
is not to go back. No, it's not a back and front.
Well, but that's what it's becoming. Please give me your guidance, members of the committee.
That depends on you as chair. You were ruling earlier, Chairman. I have no problem with a ruling. All I'm saying is that persons were able to make passionate presentation in relation to pro-life.
Please, will the committee give me your guidance?
I am just making the point that there are 2 or 3 persons who would like. I am doing it for my own clarity, as others would want. It's
So
a matter. Chairman, I have said it and I want to say it again. If this was an easy matter, whether Jamaica, the Caribbean, or the world, we have solved it already. It is a difficult matter for parliamentarians. I am not rushing this to get back to a general parliament, most of whom have not heard these presentations, and many will not read it when they get the list or get, I'm just being frank. And therefore, I believe we must have the best of the arguments, the best of our own moral, spiritual, and other position coming to the table, so that in the end, I am not comfortable, I can say it, and I'm not taking any position here, and it's not my duty, but I am not comfortable in the context of a law promulgated in 1864, that after all these years and all the arguments, that we could just come here to all these sessions, go back to Parliament, and believe that it is just okay to continue this law, not from what I've heard, and I'm saying continuing without any consideration for the arguments that have come before us. I am not saying you're going to get everything you want, but Jamaica would not be doing, or I think they said up for 200 countries, 47% have come with progressive things. All I'm saying, let the arguments prevail. Jamaica, regard it as a Christian country, but we have seen many issues. And I just believe, Chairman, that we should have the discussion, get the information out from both sides, and then allow us to make those recommendations to Parliament.
Dr. Ferguson, thank you very much. That's exactly what this committee has done for the past several months. If it is the will of the committee that persons be allowed to continue responding to the question that... No, really and truly. May I finish? May I finish?
It's very clear. I'm saying there are about 2 or 3 persons.
Very well. Who are the persons who would wish to respond?
I would want to respond.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
No, that's not what I'm recommending.
But how could one...
Then why are you recommending?
I believe that it is becoming confusing. My position is that you were able to make 7 interventions. You came back and you spoke to a question relative to religion, ethics, morality. And I raised it because the pro-choice persons have been putting these out. So I really want to hear.
So you wish to hear from this side only?
Not only, we have heard from that side already.
Yes. Going forward.
Right.
You wish to hear from these 3, but not from those 2?
Unless, that's not my intention.
Well, what is the view of the committee,
but
please?
If the committee says, fine, I have no problem. Yes. Because I don't believe anybody should be. But I'm just
so
saying,
therefore, let's hear from all
what I
then.
don't want, Chairman, is for us to bring it to a point that gives the impression that you create chaos when I've asked a deliberate question to hear the viewpoints that will bring some clarity even to myself.
So therefore, that viewpoint would have to be from all those who have a viewpoint and who could educate you, would it?
I'm not at 0, Chairman.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Chairman, I think in fairness, I think Father Reverend Richard Holong responded to the question. I also think Reverend Kenneth responded to it, and I think one other person. And all we're asking, I think Professor Opal Adissa responded, and if we could have one more person from this side, or 2 more persons to make it even, I think that is what we're asking.
Yes, I didn't get your point there, Member Gillette. So we take...
I think, Chairman, it is appropriate that we pause a moment because the member
consultation.
Yes, who had asked a question in the first place, has a right to hear the response. So probably you could just give 2 minutes to allow the consultation to begin.
Not a problem.
Yes,
We'll do just that.
It's one each. Okay.
Thank you. The ruling is that the 3 persons and the 2 persons who have indicated will be allowed to make brief presentations, and that will conclude our sitting. Is that acceptable? Very well. And Dr. Tame, were you the first? I'm sorry, I don't see your name tag. Can you turn it around for me, please? So I can identify you.
Nicosia Shakes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Shakes, thank you very much.
Yes, I think because this is a matter of public record and the members of the public will be watching this, it's important to delineate the difference between a policy of eugenics and a pro-choice policy. And this is also responding to your question, Dr. Ferguson. Eugenics is a governmental policy in which groups of people considered undesirable to the fabric of the country are targeted for extermination. And this may or may not include controlling their birth rates, often through sterilization, and forced abortion. A forced abortion is a non-elective abortion. So there's a complete difference. It was done to many people throughout history. It was done to Black and brown people in the Americas, including descendants of Africans, First Nations people. It has been done to different ethnicities throughout the world, more famously the Jews under Nazi Germany. This is completely different from a policy that gives women the right to choose an abortion. So that needs to be clarified because I've heard the word used very, very loosely. Eugenics is unethical and not moral in any way. A pro-choice policy caters to the rights of citizens, and in particular women, to have reproductive autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was helpful. Who wishes to go next? I see two. Dr. Tame, would you like to go? And
just to add to the last point that Dr. Shakes made, we are dealing with this as an ethical issue that affects women specifically. This is a women's health issue. And I think our primary consideration should be, how do we frame a law that is going to be in the best interest of those women who alone are responsible for carrying pregnancies and should, in that context, have rights to determine what they do to their own bodies. That's all.
thank you very much, Dr. Tame.
Yes.
Could you remind me of your name, please, ma'am?
Nicolette Bryan from We Change.
Yes.
So I see where biblical verses are thrown around a lot basis to deny women their rights. And I just want to hearken to that was given by from different sources. So here's what one verse says. This is Hosea 13, verse 16. Hello? Yes. So Hosea 13, verse 16 says, they will fall to the sword, their little ones dashed to the ground, and their pregnant women ripped open. Another verse in the Bible says, this is said by the Lord, no, go on and attack Amalek and do utterly destroy all they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man, woman, infant, and nursing child. Also, says by God, happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us. He who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Psalms 137, verses 8 to 9. I'm just trying to just add the points about what the Bible says about the lives of children and so on. And if you recall, the Lord also sent animals to eat children because they teased one of his prophets. And this is Elijah. I'm pretty sure the biblical scholars could point us to the exact scripture, but I don't recall it. Thank you. That's just my point.
Who will be? There are two others. Major Cook.
Yeah, Chairman, I wish to speak, and Reverend Blair and Ms. Milford.
No, we said 5. Please, please,
All right,
please.
well, myself and Reverend Blair. First thing is that the member wanted to ask about the difference between ethics, etc. And we have to have some sort of a compass, a place to start in terms of determining what is right. So far, the Bible has been the undergirding basis for our values about loving your neighbor as yourself, loving your enemies, forgiving. It is where it is practiced as it's supposed to be, it creates good society. It's the best thing to produce a properly functioning society. The church is what worked to overturn slavery, and when slavery was ended, it worked to. Would you ask the gallery, please, Chairman? I can't focus. They're going to keep making noise up there. So, the church worked to overturn slavery. It also, and it just shows that. Let me not get distracted. So, they worked to overturn slavery. It helped to build the free villages, establish education, and health.
Surely that's not the issue here, though.
The law is a signpost. It's important. People say this law was brought in to oppress or to ensure that there were blacks to work for whites. As far as I know, the law applied to both blacks and whites. It was founded in truth. So, as somebody said already, truth is not subject to time, and it's not changing. Choosing to kill an unborn child, and I'm responding to something here. Choosing to kill an unborn child is the power of the strong over the weak. It is discriminatory. And when you choose to kill a child because it seems to be less than you, because it may be deformed or it may have Down syndrome, it is eugenics. And you can have the policy being officially instituted or not so. So when a woman chooses to eliminate her unborn child because she thinks there's a problem with the child, that is unethical. It is wrong. This is not a woman's issue. It takes a man and a woman to make a child. It takes a man and a woman to make a family. The child is a separate entity to a woman. It's not something she can just, it's not a piece of her she can just choose to cut off. And we want to make that point. So now I'll hand over to Reverend Blair. Thank you.
Reverend Blair, please conclude for us, briefly. Push another one in your direction.
Yes, are you hearing me?
Very well.
Good. I just want to say God created all of us with a conscience. And I just want to say life is a promise that becomes a gift that God gives. At the age of 21, I got my girlfriend, then who's my wife now, pregnant. And we weren't responsible, we weren't prepared, and I opted to do an abortion, offered to do an abortion. The thought of it was good at the time, because I'm running away from my God-given responsibilities. But the act of it carried devastating effect on my life. After the act, I was emotionally, mentally, physically challenged. I was at the place of depression, tried to find a way to fix this problem that I've created. And the only solution that I could find is to go back to the God who could forgive me for the life that I've taken. We got married, got saved in the church, gave our life to the Lord Jesus Christ, and find that reconciliation and that comfort and joy and peace and that forgiveness that he offers. She got pregnant a few years in the marriage, and we lost that child spontaneously. Again, it was a question, would she ever have a child because of the act that I've committed? And that was something that I wondered about, I think about, I pondered over, I live with, until Lord help us that we have our first child. And I was grateful. Then we have a second child. And I watched those two children grow up. My daughter is presently in Japan teaching and representing Jamaica. And my son is going to be off to Canada to also learn and to represent Jamaica. What if I had also aborted those childs? Where would their future lie? I rest my case to this house.
I'd like to thank everyone who has made these responsive presentations, and to thank all those over the course of several months who have, I think, uniquely for this Parliament, expressed their views in a variety of ways on a very important and very sensitive issue. Be assured that the committee members respect and will take seriously all that has been put before them. We have volumes of material to go through, and when we have excused you, I will ask the members of the committee to spend a few minutes so that we can determine our process subsequent to this. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee, for the opportunity, and may God direct your decision making.
Amen. No. Thanks, Richard. Good. Can you excuse us? Goodbye. Members, could we have your attention? The process now is for us to collate all of the presentations that have been made over the many months, and I really must thank you all for your cooperation, attendance in difficult times, particularly today. I am suggesting that we invite our secretary to be responsive to each of us during the month of August, to offer an approach to the question of the state of the law. That is our remit. And that, subject to convenience, that we try and meet towards the end of August to see if we can collate those positions. There may be other interactions between us. Certainly I would want to see if we can craft a report which would be available for presentation to Parliament early after its resumption in September. I believe the scheduled resumption is about the 10th of September. And I think that clearly we need some time to revise and to think, and no doubt to consult, and then to meet to see what we have come up with. Is that an acceptable way forward? Juliet? Okay. Philip? Philip busy.
Brutality isn't a legality. There's no rationality as to why this abnormality should become a mentality. A mentality which kills and tortures. Are you really telling me you're afraid to speak out because you might be called an informer?